there's a revolving door between Wall Street and the regulatory agencies that guide them. And FINRA itself, which is one of the main regulatory bodies over the financial industry, is what's called a self-regulatory organization. So the members that make up the rulemaking body in FINRA are the financial firms that are being regulated. So they're making the rules and enforcing the rules on themselves, and so they have no incentive to actually kick anyone out of the game, no matter how abusive their transgressions are.
Right.
It doesn't matter. So they can just keep doing this, and this is what GameStop really exposed for so many people. I think, it's a financial movement in one sense, but it's also a social movement, because what was revealed to everyone in real time was like, oh my God, like this system that we thought existed was a free market, that we were all buying stock and allowed to buy stock in a free market and punish these short sellers. And the short sellers should know, like, logically, you're doing a very high convexity trade. You're shorting a company with there's a limited profit that you can, because the stock can only fall to zero, right? You can't go negative. So if it's $1,000 a share, you can make $1,000 a share of short profit. But there's unlimited downside, I should say. The stock can go up, which means you can lose infinite money. Obviously not technically infinite, but there's just
lose
very
all your
high
equity.
losses. And so they should realize that there's the risk for these trades, and you should hedge for them. And you should be prepared that these things can happen and you can blow up. And we were blowing up these funds in January of 2021, and they turned off the buy button to save the clearing brokers and the prime brokers and the hedge funds and market makers who are shorting this company.
And so then people are awakening to the fact that this game is rigged. It's not fair, equitable. There's rules that are being unevenly applied, right? This one group, even the bailout itself, right? Was it printed money, or was this private bailouts?
It was, okay, so for Melvin Capital, the hedge fund, that was a private bailout. That was from Point 72 and Citadel. But when we're talking about the NSCC, they didn't they didn't receive a bailout in the traditional sense of like the Fed having to do an injection. But they waived all the capital. They waived 75% of the capital, the collateral charges that should.
Gotcha.
So according to their own risk models, all these trades hadn't cleared. They would have had to hold X amount of capital. And like I said, during that period, the week and a half or whatever of January 2021 run up, they waived $55 billion of the charges.
And so that is corruption by definition, right? Because the definition of corruption I like is the uneven application of rules, right? So they have an application of rules per their risk model, but then they waive that for these individuals because of this revolving door thing, right? This is hey, a guy calling his buddy saying we're in a tight spot, pulling some strings, calling in some favors, and then he gets these collateral requirements waived.
Absolutely.
So that's basically corruption. So that's what people then was that the bigger deal about GameStop, is that people were waking up to the inherent corruption in the financial system?
I think absolutely. And look, we didn't figure out this stuff about NSCC until September and October of 2021 when the reports came out. Like the House Financial Services report actually showed that the NSCC had done this. At the time, all we saw was Robinhood shut off the buy button. We all got robbed. Like, screw the system. We're all like, it's corrupt and it's broken. And, it wasn't until, I think it was like the next day when people started to realize that it wasn't just Robinhood that had cut off the buy button. It was like, I think 60 other brokers and even international brokers. And the reason why is because the clearing houses themselves were being told to turn off the buy button. We're being told to not.
And who was
put
making
position
that
close only?
Who was making that instruction for them to?
It's still opaque. Like, I can't give you like a single name, but I would say the people that are involved are obviously the heads of the DTCC and the NSCC, the large conglomerates that run the clearing operations for the entire U.S. stock market.
Well, did the GameStop movement ever figure out the deeper corruption that is the DTCC? The fact that you can't even own an equity in this country, that it's all centrally owned?
We did. We did. So to continue the story, right? So the stock price rips up to 450 a share in pre-market. Buy button gets shut off, falls to 300 or like 250, and then comes back to 300. It ends that weekend at like 3:30 on the Friday evening, and then for the next 3 weeks, the price just falls and falls and falls and falls, and everyone is like, wow, this is crazy. Like they turn off the buy button and then the price just magically falls,
Mhm.
and none of us are selling. Like what the fuck is going on? Like what's happening? And then end of February, in aftermarket trading, the price rips up from $40 to $140 in a day, and then it goes again for the next 2 weeks, goes all the way back to 300. And people on the Reddit boards this time are like, whoa, we weren't like last time we were all buying options and like coordinating this thing and kind of like memeing it into existence. And now like it's ripping when there was no words on the Reddit board beforehand. Like what's going on? And this cycle started to appear where every 3 weeks, the price would just rip up and then be slammed down and then trade sideways and then rip up and slam down. And so people started saying there's something in the settlement system, obviously, that's causing this. And that's when people started looking in much deeper into the DTCC and the NSCC and what actually has occurred. And there was one viral post that was written by a guy named Adobit that went viral called House of Cards. And this 3-part post was about basically the history of the DTCC and how the DTCC moved to centralized clearing and centralized ownership of all stocks. So DTCC owns, so there's something called beneficial ownership, and then obviously title ownership, legal, like street name ownership. Yeah. And the DTCC, because they're the centralized broker or centralized clearinghouse for all trades.
Yeah, the CCP, right?
Yeah.
The Central Counterparty, which is an interesting acronym.
Exactly. It's a funny, especially if you heard our early part on China, but they have the street and legal name holding of almost all securities in the stock market. Yeah. All the people who hold it through a broker are what are called beneficial owners. Right. So meaning we own the benefits of owning the stock. Yeah. But not the legal owners. We don't have the legal ownership of it. And so that's a huge, right? That's a huge change. And that means that they can basically do what they want with our shares. Yeah. It's part of the reason why, like we've had time and time again where there have been cases where, you know, in a normal stock brokerage account, you can have a cash account or a margin account. If you have a margin account, which means you use margin that the broker gives you, you are essentially agreeing to lend out your shares. And you are saying, okay, I want to earn income on these shares. You lend them out, you pay me an interest rate for the shares that are being lent out. And in a cash account, they're supposedly held in cash, held in your name. They're not allowed to be lent out. Right. And there have been, you know, lawsuit after lawsuit that found Goldman, Wells Fargo, you know, like even, you know, Fidelity, even like, what's it called, Interactive Brokers. All these brokers have taken your shares in a cash account and lent them out to other counterparties without telling you and pocketed the money. And they always just get fined for it and get told not to do it again. And then they can repeat, they can do it again. Yeah. And so they can do this again because you are the beneficial owner. Right. You're not the legal owner. You're not the legal owner. Which is
again a violation of private property, right?
Absolutely.
It's your fucking property. You should both earn the benefits and have full legal control over the thing that you quote unquote own. But they're basically bifurcating ownership into these two different categories where they have control, although you have the benefits in normal circumstances. But if there's abnormal circumstances, well, then you can bet your ass the legal ownership is what trumps, right? They can do whatever they want with it, as you said. So you said you were using this as an opportunity. I don't know if you're continue the story if you want, but at some point in the story, you said you were using this as an opportunity to orange pill people, basically, right? Saying like, hey, this inherent corruption in the system, this is why Bitcoin exists, and this is what Bitcoin fixes.
Yeah. So, well, what started happening is, so, you know, these Reddit boards blew up. I was part of Wall Street Bets, and then there was one called GME, and then SUBSTACK, and I was posting research and analysis about GameStop, and then I started posting much more about my macro theory dollar endgame, which is that what we talked about, like the switch of reserve currencies. And all those posts went massively viral. And this was the year that I also got really back into Bitcoin, and I started realizing, I'm like, man, this is the solution for all these people. And all these people need to learn that they're right in that the settlement system is broken. You know, the stock market is broken. The naked shorting mechanisms by the large players are virtually unlimited. And it's going to be, we basically can only rely on public pressure to change things. And without, you know, a physical revolution, there's not much that's probably going to change. Yeah. And so in especially the last 2 or 3 years, I've been pushing Bitcoin and been telling them like, look, you're right about all these things are broken. We've tried direct registration. So that means like people were taking their shares out of the broker and pulling it back to the transfer agent, which means you put it back into your real legal name. So instead of you being the beneficial owner, now you're title owner again. But that takes a whole long process.
Right.
The transfer agent is not set up as a brokerage. It's not liquid.
Right.
They're only connected with like a 15-minute lag to the stock market. Like it's
Does the DTCC still own it in that case though?
No, if you transfer to a transfer agent, it's in your name again.
Gotcha.
But the problem is it's difficult and it's lengthy.
Then
and
it's not liquid at that point.
It's not very liquid.
Yeah.
So of course they because of legal pressure in the late 90s, they were forced to allow the system to exist, but less than 3% of all shares are ever transferred into DRS. So no one ever does it. Because again, would you rather hold in a broker and be able to trade day to day, or be held in this transfer agent with like physical certificates, but it's like really hard to move and really hard to trade? Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably going to try something similar with Bitcoin, I would imagine. Just making self-custody as painful and inconvenient as possible to keep it on an exchange and therefore centrally manipulable.
Yeah. And they'll try to make the argument that what you should have is an IOU of Bitcoin. It's more liquid. It's more easy to transfer. It's, more fungible. It's more convenient. And then they'll try to convince people to buy that and hold that instead of actual Bitcoin. But the benefit of Bitcoin is that you can actually just physically settle it and verify on the transaction, on the ledger for yourself.